In this tutorial, we're going to make our first report mill report, and we're going to start in an IDE. So I'll just bring up an IDE and I'm going to open up a sample project, and this project has access to a movies database, really just a table of movies with all of its data. And so I'm just going to create a simple programming file, and I'm going to call it write.xml because I need a data set to create my template. So in here, I'm just going to create a main method, and I'm going to fetch a row of data. So I have a list of rows, and I'll fetch by saying, in this case, well, we have a Java console. So I'm going to say get site get rows with a new query for my movies table. So this just does a fetch rows, in fact fetch sample rows, and then I'm going to write data set. And I'll do this with Report Mill's RM.xml writer. I'll create a new one, and I'll just tell it to write object, and I'll give it the rows, and we could pass in here any JDBC results set or plain old Java objects or EJBs. In this case it's just Java collections, so we tried to do all the magic of figuring this out and writing out a nice sample data set. And I just want to write it to my desktop. Dataset.xml. So I'll save this and run it, and it runs, and I'll close this, and here is my data set now. And if I open it up, we see that it's got all the sample data set that we can use to create a template. So now I'll run Report Mill, and I'll just say create a new document here. And it comes up in the context of a page in a familiar page layout paradigm. And so we can immediately start drawing the page headers and page footers. So I'll just choose the text tool here and drag out a rect, and I'll call this a Hollywood report. And I'll make the text bold, and I'll center it, and I'll make it bigger. And I'll center it vertically as well. And then I'll choose a color for the background here, and I can even bring up the color panel and right click and get a little bit of a gradient. I can choose a stroke for that. And but now where we get into real reporting is we'll start with some simple keys. So if I go to the keys panel here, I can drag in the built-in keys. So I can drag in today's date, and I'll make this text field a little wider here. And you'll notice the keys are just text boxes that have a key surrounded by an @ sign. So I can say today's date, and I can make this bolder and a little bigger, and I'll stretch the box a little bit. And then I'll do the same thing down here. I'll have some page numbering. I'll put that at the bottom, and I'll center that text. And if I do a preview, right off the bat, we see we got today's date and we've got the page numbering. So now where we get into some real reporting is we need to tell Report Mill about our data set. So I'm going to do that with this XML file that we generated. So I'll drag and drop that XML file in there. And now the keys browser shows us that we have a list of objects. And the objects each have the keys from our movie objects, title and show date and revenue and studio. So I'm going to drag and drop in this list of objects. And the list is delineated with the double arrows. And if I drag and drop that in, now Report Mill asks us to create a data set reporting element, like a table, labels, graph, or a crosstab. So I'll go with a table, and it gives me a template for my table, and I'll position and size this to cover the region of the page that I want my report to cover. And so now the keys browser shows all the keys specific to an individual movie. So the keys browser is context sensitive. So if I select the table, we see the movie keys. If I go back to the document, we see the top level keys again. So with the table selected, I'll drag and drop in the movie's title, the movie's show date, the movie's revenue, and then I'll just get rid of this last column here. The revenue column I'll make a little shorter here, and same thing with the show date so that our title's got plenty of space. And for the revenue, I'll line it to the right and I'll put a $ formatter on there. And so just with this, I can go ahead and say preview, and boom, we've got a report. And it shows all the movies, and when it gets to the bottom of the page, it paginates and goes on to the next page and on to the next page. If we do preview as HTML, we can see what this looks like in the browser as HTML. And we can do a preview as PDF, and same thing, we get the platform PDF viewer here showing us the report in PDF. So from here we can go and do all the standard things in reporting. I can just drag and drop any key, like the category or the studio or the rating. So in this case, I'll drag and drop the studio key into the list of groupings. And so just with that, it has now separated these movies out by their studio. And I can drag and drop keys for the studio into this studio details row. And again, I'll get rid of a couple of columns here. And I'll shrink this one over here. And I'm going to choose an aggregate key now. So I'm going to navigate to total revenue for this group of movies that is grouped by the studio. So the revenue, again, I'll align to the right, and I'll add a $ formatter. I'll make this a little taller, and I'll make the whole row bolder and bigger. And I'll go ahead and put a background color on here and a stroke. And now I'll do a preview, and so now we're seeing all the movies broken down by their studio with a total revenue. And again, it's paginated across 6 pages in this case. And then we can also do the same thing with sorts. So with the studio grouping selected, I will tell it to sort by total revenue. So I'm actually sorting by an aggregate here. And I'll switch this from ascending to descending. So we'll get the most successful studios listed first. And then inside of here, I want these movies to be listed by their revenue. So I'll drag in the revenue. And again, I'll go descending. And then some of the movies I know have the same revenue, so we'll do a backup sort on title. So I'll drag that in there. So now we have a much more sophisticated report. If I do a preview here, we're seeing the most successful studios listed first, and the total revenue for them. And then inside of there, the movies that contributed the most to that success are listed first. And then down here, what 2 movies have the same revenue, we see they're listed alphabetically. So from here, we just simply save our template, and I'll save it to my desktop, and I'll call it Movie Report. And I'll just go back to my IDE now, and I'll drag my movie template into my project, and then inside of here, I'll just add a new file for generate. In fact, let's just go back to our XML here, and we already fetch all these movies. So instead of writing the data set, let's generate the report. So I'll just say create a new RM document. So this is our template file, and I'll just use the constructor here. And in this case, I'll pass it the file, and the file is let's see, movie report.rpt, and then with the template I'll just say RM document report is equal to doc generate report with the movies, with the rows. And then I'll say report write to users desktop. Oops. Users Jeff desktop report.pdf. And so just with that, I'll run my program here, and it completed, and so over here now is my report. I double click it, and there it is. And in the context of your web application, you could simply get the bytes instead of writing it. You can say bytes is equal to report get bytes PDF, and then you could simply append this to your HTTP response and set the content to be application PDF, and the same thing with HTML. So this has been an example of adding a report to your application in 10 minutes or less.